Join former FBI senior forensic examiners Becky Passmore and Stacey Eldridge as they dig into the world of digital forensics, one bite at a time. Now leading their own consulting firms and educating the next generation of cyber sleuths. These badass babes of digital forensics bring sharp insight, real-world case experience, and a dose of humor to the bits and bytes that build today's investigations. From deep dives into business email compromise and ransomware attacks, Becky's specialty, to cracking the complexities of iPhone forensics, Stacey's obsession. This podcast delivers insider knowledge for professionals, students, and true crime techies alike. If you've ever wondered what really happens when the digital trail is all that's left, tune in and start parsing the truth.
Welcome back to Parsing the Truth, one bite at a time. I am your host, Stacey Eldridge, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Becky Passmore. We are the True Crime-ish podcast for digital forensic examiners. Not only do we focus on the facts and the artifacts that you need to know, we also focus on what you have to do to get your evidence admitted into court. And that brings us to where this podcast left off last week. As we continue this conversation with Jessica Hyde, we're going to pick right back up where we left off with Daubert and AI, and we're going to get into some information about peer reviewing, and then we're going to conclude with some closing remarks from Jessica. Let's pick right back up where we left off.
I don't think I've ever been so excited about pending legislation. But again, I guess because it actually matters to what we do and this current thing. But I think that, and I am sure that there's a million things. And again, I am not an attorney that I am missing in terms of the application of this law and how it will affect things. But just the fact that we're saying if an AI is coming up with something, you need an expert to say what it is. That's good. However, our experts' reasoning can't be because the tool that also used AI said so.
Exactly.
And can I bring up one point about my concern there too? A lot of the AI is getting better and doing something I like, and I like to give credit. So I see, for example, that Magnet and Mobasi in their AI are citing exactly where you can go in the data to get it. However, I think this might introduce confirmation bias, where it's here. So then you go to that location and you go, yes, it's right there. But now you're not thinking, what else could have caused this? Is this stored somewhere else? What are the other supporting and contradictory traces to support or contradict this theory of why this is here? And all of those other things, because we're getting that confirmation bias of validating. Yes, that's right there. And that's because we've been taught when we're running artifact parsers that the way you validate the timestamp is you go to the raw data and you manually parse it yourself. So now the AI is telling you, this is where I got it from. Go check here, and you're going to check there. And guess what? It's going to be there, but you don't know why it's there. And part of what we need to do to meet those 5 Daubert standards is that first one of testing and understand having that sound methodology as to why it's there.
That's right.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm so glad that, thank you so much for letting me talk about this, because this is a topic I've been pretty passionate about, and this might be very niche. People may not really be all excited about Daubert hearings, but they also may not be sitting in them, and they better be prepared to, and they better be prepared to deal with this intersection of AI and Daubert.
And I think you just spoke on it. Many people probably have not heard. If I went out here and canvassed all these law enforcement agencies that I work with or that I know that are doing digital forensics, they're pulling data off of devices, they're running reports, are they even aware of Daubert standards? And
they're aware of it as a word and that it's a thing that exists. But I mean, their responsibility.
Yeah. That's a different question. And are they prepared for that hearing? And are they being, and again, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it holds us to the standard of excellence we should be doing, the standard of excellence that prevents us from being replaced by AI, the standard of excellence that protects the innocent and protects people from being wrongly accused. It is exactly what we would want the standard to be for any trial where we are on one side or the other and not just a forensics expert.
Yeah.
And it is what we should expect from our justice system.
Yep. And there's been a lot of stuff, chatter, if you will. I see it on LinkedIn. People are calling for, we need standards to hold ourselves accountable. Digital forensic examiners must be held accountable. I mean, it seems like we have it, and that it's
We have it.
Daubert. I mean,
Maybe,
it could.
maybe. This is how the
I know
courts
it's
hold us accountable.
how the courts. Okay, but
This is an interesting area because this is one that maybe I have a slightly different opinion here, Stacey. The Daubert is about the evidence being introduced, right? Does that artifact get introduced? The voir dire is about, does the expert get introduced? I would challenge that we are missing something as we're a young field.
Okay.
Right? We're just over 40 years old as a field. I'm basing that number off of HTCIA, I think is now 41 years old. So we'll take the oldest professional organization and say we're somewhere as a field about 40 years old. And I don't know that medical doctors, when they were 40 years in, had medical licensing boards. I don't know that attorneys, when they were first practicing law in England 40 years in, had the bar exam. I don't know. We have a very mesh way of saying that somebody's qualified. We do have the legal process. So I'm saying the legal process does exist for saying you're qualified to be an expert. There is a legal process for this. Evidence can be admitted. But we don't have a minimum standard that's universal, even within just the United States. And I tend to not like to be so U.S.-centric, but this actually is a U.S.-centric topic with Daubert and FRE. Please apply this to your jurisdictions as applicable, friends. But we don't have a body or a standard, like some people will say you need to be certified in your tool that you're using. You need to be certified with an external thing. In some states, you need a a private investigator's license. In some jurisdictions or some agencies may require you to have done an in-house proficiency test. Some places may look at your education. There is inconsistent standards across our country. There is not a threshold. We have no way of saying that is standard who is qualified to be doing this work. My theory is that we have two choices. We as a community could come up with something, or the courts will impose something upon us, and it will probably be something we hate. So I would love and I think the first time I've had this conversation for a couple of years. I remember having this conversation way pre-COVID with Brett and Harlan once, and a bunch of other people. But I really, and I believe we were all kind of in that same mind. And I know Brett's written about this a couple of times, or at least alluded to it. If we don't figure out what that is, it's going to happen to us.
Yeah.
And I'd rather it come from us than be legislated at us, because we would have a better understanding. I don't know what the right group or board or whatever it is to introduce that. But if somebody's working on that problem, please reach out to me. I'd love to help.
There's lots of people noisy out there about it. I don't know what solutions are being brought forth, but hopefully the solutions are coming forth internally. I've experienced in other rules when things are legislated down, you may not like them because they don't make any sense. But I guess
you all know how to reach me. If you want to start working on it, you know how to get a hold of me. Get a hold of me. I'm happy to contribute.
But to your point about what are you certified in or by whom and whatever, I do remember one of the reasons I started in IASIS when I was in the FBI is I felt that it would show my expertise in a stronger fashion if I could say, you know what, not only did I get certified in the FBI, this external organization also certified me. And so that's why I did that.
100%.
Yeah.
And lots of us have varying certifications, and different bodies and different certifications do testing in different ways, but there's not, and I would hate to say you should be getting this cert or this cert, when folks who are breaking into the field ask me the question, or mentees of mine ask me the question, well, which cert should I get? My answer is, which cert does the job you're trying to get require? Because it's really going to vary based on where you're working and what they want. And I'd hate for people to spend time and money and it not be the thing they need for that role. And I hate to say that, right? IASIS is great. I like the fact that I do not have an IASIS cert, but I do really appreciate the fact that the IASIS certification does require an actual exam as part of the process. That's fantastic. But what certification works for you is typically going to be from what certification your current role, the role you're getting, or your prior roles required. And once you have the ones from your prior roles, which is why the IASIS cert isn't the one I have, because my prior roles had different certs that they needed. So I've maintained those certs.
Oh, yeah.
And that's just what's logical to do. So I really feel that that needs to still be sorted out by us as an industry. And there's nothing that says that that sorting out has to say one cert over another. It could be, X number of years of experience, X certifications, X process. I'm not trying to prescribe that now. I'm just saying it's something that needs to be thought about before it happens to us. I'm not saying it's what's needed. I'm not saying it's what's necessary, just to be clarified. I'm just saying I'd rather it come from us than it be put upon us.
Right. Because putting upon us not going to always be what we think it should be.
Right.
So if we start that process, then we have a say in it.
Right. Just like you have a say in every single standard that's out there, if you don't like it, put a public comment out there, even if it's not in public commenting period, because in all honesty, those should be the standards that you're referencing and citing, and that your lab policies are referencing and citing as the standards, because that is the NIST Standards Derivation Organization, at least for US.
Exactly.
Jessica, during this conversation, you've mentioned peer reviewing and the importance of that when it comes to Daubert standards. But in this situation, we're kind of talking about peer reviewing, that testing that you've done, some of those findings related to that. But I think there's different types of peer reviewing, like you've done your case work, and that goes through a peer review process, especially if you're in an accredited laboratory. So should we focus a little bit on the different types of peer reviews? Are they the same? Are they different? Is their focus just different? How is the stuff that's peer reviewed for Daubert and being published different than the guy at the next cube over doing your peer review after you're done with your case?
I love this question. And first off, I'm going to say something else I love that you recently put out. You put out a really, really, really cool meme about peer review. If you want to describe it for a second.
Yeah, so we have Kermit the Frog is drinking some tea. And I say at the top, what do I say? I say, oh, if your peer review is just a grammar check, then you're hanging them out to dry. And then at the bottom, I have aggressively drinks tea as the final words.
I cannot tell you how much I was in love when you put that out. So this is a great question, because peer review from an academic perspective, which is what I was speaking to in the Daubert, of saying that that artifact or that trace has been peer reviewed by the community, is a different concept than peer review of your report in your lab. However, there is the potential that your lab internally can meet the peer review standard for Daubert by conducting an internal peer review, presuming that the type of peer review you're doing. And the reason I just mentioned your meme is because that peer review is not a rubber stamp peer review where you are just saying, yes, this is what this is. It would require a peer review where the artifact is being tested and validated by someone in your peer review process. Now, let's talk about that peer review process. Ricky Johnson, great examiner out of South Carolina. You should have him on the show too. See, I'm just going to name other people for you to have guests on. Several years ago, he reached out to me and he was like, hey, Jess, do you know of a great peer review checklist for doing mobile forensics? And I was like, no, want to write one? So we wrote one.
Nice.
Right? Actually, it's if you go to hexordia.com and go to the resources, there's a walkthrough and checklist, and there's a peer review checklist. And for the record, that peer review checklist was peer reviewed, and we list our peer reviewers of it. And if you go through that checklist, it's actually talking about the peer reviewer in 4 different categories of phases of evidence challenging things. So the peer reviewers should be answering questions like, are all timestamps understood correctly as to if they are local timestamps or UTC timestamps by artifact and then applied to the timeline correctly? Right? So that's just an example of something a peer reviewer should be thinking about when they're peer reviewing. Some of those go about are things like in the peer review process, what other things could have caused this artifact to exist? What is the granularity of the geolocation's reference? And it's all of these things that you should be doing. A peer review should be another forensics examiner checking the technical merit by not necessarily redoing the exam, but coming back and saying, can I tell from the report and the notes if this thing was done and how it was done? And can I just check to validate that or test it myself? Or sometimes going back to the examiner and saying, did you do this? Did you do this? I would say most of my peer reviews are not just redlining the crap out of the report, but are more asking questions back to the report.
Yeah.
Asking questions. How about this? What about this? Did we consider this? Was this thought of? How did you determine this? What was the reason for this? And asking those things. To be honest, the goal there is to make sure that you're not incomplete and that you're doing it. And if you're, the peer review should level up the report. That's the whole goal. You should want your report to be peer reviewed because I'd rather my own team ask me the question than opposing counsel.
100%.
Exactly.
And the meme got several comments like that. They're like, look, your buddy can point out some inaccuracies or some things that are missing, or you wait until court and the opposing side does it. You know,
right?
Take your choice.
You should want the
100%.
most critical. Now, I will tell you, this is something that, like, with my team, I'm always like, if they send me back something and it's too flowery, I'm like, no, this isn't an acceptable review. Tell me what I got wrong. Tell me what I didn't think about. Tell me what questions you have. Because we are all human, we are all fallible, we all have different perspectives, we all aren't going to think. We need to challenge each other because, again, our work has consequences. Let's lay that out. Somebody's life or liberty or justice is on the line in every case we work. Or assets, or their ability to have a livelihood, or to keep their business, which employs people. All of these things are on the line.
Yep.
Our work has real outcomes in real people's lives. That is heavy, that has gravity, and we need to treat it as such.
Yeah. And I don't think every person out there doing this kind of work sees it like that or understands the gravity or the importance of it. And it can be disheartening.
Sometimes I'll tell you what I find disheartening. You know, I talk to examiners all over the country and the world. And I'll say the number one thing that makes me sad is when somebody tells me I want to be digging deeper, but my lab doesn't let me. My lab's policy is that we extract, we see if we have what we need, and then we move on, right? Like, there are labs that really are processing evidence, turning it over. And if it goes to court, then we look at it. Okay, fair. Maybe you're only looking at the things that go to court. But if it goes to court, there's still sometimes running into those challenges. And this is what makes me sad. You know what? This is what makes me sad because can you imagine going in a Daubert challenge and you never even did anything more than pumped it out the report?
What's your favorite term for that, Becky?
Pump and dump.
Pump and dump?
Pump and dump.
I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, but isn't that what we do when we drink, when we're breastfeeding?
Yes, that is also one thing that well, some people do. I was told if you can find the baby, you can feed the baby. That's the rule. So I don't know what the digital forensic equivalent rule of that would be, but
if it's going to court, it needs more than a pump and dump.
Yeah. There you go.
How about that? How about we make that line of if you can find the baby?
And
so the equivalent is it's more than just if you could generate a report with your tool. Yeah. Same thing as if you can find the baby.
And I think we also, I mean, I get the labs are overwhelmed. I
100%.
get the examiners that are, you know, it's like an assembly line. I get it, right? I've been there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, in general, many of them want to be more passionate. Many of
They
them
do.
want to be able to dig in. But I think they have to set their standards too. And if they stop taking so much at the door and start setting some standards, maybe, different other things would happen. Like, okay, we don't have enough people if we're going to meet these standards. We don't have enough people if we're going to do what we're required to do. I mean, SWCD it didn't just start overnight. I mean, it probably did start overnight, but I mean, it's
But
been
there was a need.
edited. Yeah, there
It
was
was
a
a
need,
problem.
and it's been edited, and it's continuously edited, and it's a living document, and
Yep, they're all living. Yeah.
yeah. So
I'll throw a shout out to JD and Mary Hovarth, who were the champions of that organization, and Mary's still very involved, and Mary's amazing. But what I would like to say in terms of people who are being forced into this position is I think that boundary I said earlier is a good one. If I need to testify, I need to test if I understand. And I think if we can start with that, because a lot of things won't go to court. And
True.
maybe you're presenting data and the other side is agreeing or not agreeing and making decisions based on that. Maybe there's pleas, maybe there's arbitration, maybe there's lots of things that can happen where things aren't going to go to court. But if you're going to go to court, that's where you're going to be held to the Daubert Standard. And so that's really where you should empower yourself to say, my work is going to be upheld to the Daubert Standard. I really need to take the time to prepare for this to ensure that we're set to go.
Yeah.
Like, be empowered, right?
Agreed.
But yes, 100%. We all do not always have the time. We need to do everything we need to do. 100. We're not always given the opportunities, the hours, the cost, the time, the materials, the equipment. All of those things exist, that those things can be issues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You will have challenges.
Yes. So walk us through a nightmare scenario. What
Ooh.
happens under cross-examination when an examiner has to admit they didn't independently test how a specific app parsed a timestamp or deleted a message?
Wow. Great question, right? Because this goes to the point of what happens if, when we're doing our work, we're not thinking about Daubert in the beginning. Well, you're going to, on cross, when you have to say, I have not independently tested this, but I was relying upon a user guide, a blog post, and I'm specifically picking user guide and blog post here because these are things I could see an examiner stating, or citing a comment on a listserv, because those three things do not constitute a peer review process. They are not a documented peer review process. So number one, it is possible to testify to something if it has been tested, even if you didn't do the testing, if that is documented, right?
Okay.
So this artifact has been tested, and that was published in DFRWS EU 2025 conference proceedings in this article. And it was tested, and this is the validity, this is the peer-reviewed article, and it is generally accepted because it was presented in front of a conference of, hundreds of examiners, and an error rate doesn't apply in this instance. And look at that. Now we've met all of our principles of Daubert, right? We've got our general acceptance. We're set, right? First off, you would need to know that. You would need to have done your homework. And the reason that you didn't test it was because it is an artifact that has been previously tested. The theory had undergone peer review, and it was done in accordance with a standard and was, generally accepted. Now, if you're doing something and it's novel for the first time, this is that instance where peer review internally might not suffice because you don't necessarily get general acceptance because nobody else knows that it exists, which is why you probably want to put it out there, blog it, send it to DFI review. Now, the nightmare scenario. The nightmare scenario, instead of having something that you tested or something that's been tested by the community, instead, you get up there and they say, did you independently test it? And you go, no. They go, do you know of any instance in which this has been tested, this artifact, that these actions cause this trace? And the response is, no, the artifact guide, or this blog says this, or this listserv says this. And they would go, okay, that did not undergo peer review. No. And are you aware of what standards or controls were used in order to publish that blog post or that listserv article or that artifact guide? No. And has this been talked about in the community? Was there general acceptance at a conference or a paper that was received? Not to the best of my knowledge. Well, Your Honor, this does not meet the 5 principles of, well, would you say that this meets the 5 principles of Daubert as you understand it? And you're going to be forced to say no. And then, the judge has the opportunity to then say that that artifact is inadmissible. Now, if that artifact was the sole artifact that then led to other actions in the case, because we are now asking about worst case scenario, meaning
Right.
that artifact was the artifact or the finding that then led to the request of other evidence. Now there's the potential not only that that finding could be thrown out, but that because those other findings wouldn't exist without knowledge of this artifact, and now we don't know that this artifact is even suitable for court. Now, all of that other evidence, including the video of the homicide or the video of that child being sexually abused, is now not admissible in court because we were only able to get to that video because of this other thing that didn't meet Daubert. Now that's your nightmare scenario.
That is your nightmare scenario.
This episode is powered by Ace Forensics. Ace Forensics has been building computer systems since 1983, and they deliver high-performance workstations, laptops, and servers built for today's digital forensic tools. They offer unmatched value and the industry's only 5-year warranty. If you're tired of waiting on slow machines, head over to aceforensics.com for a competitive quote today and have Ace Forensics build the systems you deserve. And now, back to our episode.
How often are you aware of Daubert hearings to get evidence in, or
So Daubert is usually the other way. It's usually evidence that's being presented, and so it's challenged in a Daubert hearing. So
Okay.
a Daubert hearing is usually for the opposing circumstance, in my understand. Hashtag not an attorney, not a lawyer. I just get told where I got to show up at the summons, right? But so my understanding as a non-lobby, that's my term now, lobby. You like that?
I like
Is that my understanding is that it's used for the challenge of something being admitted, not being used to support something being.
Okay.
But I don't know how often it happens. Remember, we're all only skewed by
Right.
what we get. And I tend to get things. I don't do a lot of pump and dump type cases in my current role, for example, because I wouldn't be able to give you a percentage of which ones wind up being challenged. And I'll give an example of those blinders. Man, my children never, ever had a sleepover. And that's because of what I've seen on cases, right?
Yeah.
It's
Ding,
because
ding.
right. You know too much.
Yep.
You know too much but I know that all people are not bad. Yes. But I know that I see a lot of bad stuff on cases, but they're devices that have been seized in a legal proceeding. That's different, right? And I recognize that. I don't think that all people are bad, but of course my view is skewed because I only see things that are being brought into a court of law. Not that all things are bad, but if it's coming to us in any circumstance, there is at least an accusation, right? Whether there's findings one way or the other is irrelevant. The accusations exist, so we're only seeing the subset of things that are most people are not accused of crimes in their lives. I know that, but I still never let my children sleep over anywhere.
But we have to deal with the crimes every day. There's crimes every day,
Right, because that's
what our world is.
That's what our world is. Our world is skewed.
Yeah.
Right,
It really
our world
is.
is skewed.
Mm-hmm. I've said that many times, especially with my old partner. We talked about how we feel like through our eyes, 80% of the world is bad and 20% is good, and through other people's eyes, that they don't see it that way.
They're lucky,
they-
right? Their ignorance is bliss.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
But I feel somebody has to do what we do. So I'm
That's
glad we
right.
get to do
Certainly.
it and get to help victims and get to help people who are wrongly accused and get to help settle disputes and get to the crux of matters as best
Sure.
as we can from our perspective within the scopes of our investigation.
Well, with that, I think we're actually close to wrapping it up. And before we conclude, Jessica, do you have like one final thought on anything you want to share that you didn't get a chance to say yet?
I would say that you can do this. So if you're listening to this and this whole concept of testing and validating the evidence is outside of your norm, and it's outside of your norm because your environment hasn't provided the opportunity for you to do this type of deep testing, to be able to figure these things out, you can do this. You can test, you can validate, you can discover new artifacts, you can parse things that are not supported by the commercial tools. You can do it. There are methodologies to this. You can read the SWIG DE. You can check out some of the content that I and others put out. You can do it, and you should be doing it, and you should share it once you do it.
Love
Exactly.
that. Love
I
that.
do too.
And we're going to link to so many things in the show notes. So
Right.
whether you're listening or watching, make sure to go back and get those show notes so you can get all of those links. But I think this conversation is a great reminder that digital forensics isn't just about collecting the artifacts or dumping out reports. It's about building conclusions that can survive scrutiny. So if today's conversation made you think differently about how you work your cases, testing your tools, validating your findings, or preparing for your time on the witness stand, then we've accomplished exactly what we've all set out here to do today.
And you know, Jessica, we use this platform as education. And I think your experience and your giving us this knowledge gives this to our listeners. If they've never heard of Daubert, now they have. If they've never tested tools, peer reviewed, or prepared for testimony, now they've heard how they need to do that. So if you've enjoyed the episode, be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, share it with a colleague. The more strengthened our community is in understanding of sound forensic methodology, the stronger the profession becomes. So until next time, stay safe, stay sharp, and as always, keep parsing the truth one bite at a time.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow us to get notified the next time a new episode drops. If you can do more, head on over to parsingthetruth.com and donate by clicking on the donate button. Parsing the Truth is a nonprofit organization, and we are raising money to send a new digital forensic examiner to IASIS training next year in Orlando. Thanks.